Today we have a familiar face at Columbus Rotary. Steve Stover is a former legislative counsel for the Ohio State Bar Association. He's more familiar to us as a foodie. Steve is passionate about food, and he has taught cooking classes for over 40 years, has reviewed restaurants for almost the same time, and currently teaches cooking classes all over town, judges charity events, and speaks to community groups. He also still co-hosts a show on WOSU radio every 11 a.m. every Friday. He has been the editor of the Baguette Restaurant Guide for 12 years.
I can't get my right. How are we gonna do that? I got it right here. I got it right here. I got it right here. But there's some other things that you should know about Steve. Steve talks a lot. Hold forth on stage, that can lead to snafus. Those are more frequent when his wife Mary isn't present to rescue him. One that probably the most impact was a class at the Seasons Farmhouse, a cooking school that Steve taught at, and the recipe required softened butter, but Steve kept totally melting the butter probably 3 or 4 times before giving up, all due to getting carried away on a story, no doubt, about how many Michelin stars were involved in a recent vacation. An affliction I call the Vanderbilt syndrome. Never asked to do a class there again at the Seasons Farmhouse.
And I would be remiss, I don't know if he was introduced, but this is Jim Boudreaux, one of our members. If you look on the seniority list, it's on the tables. I think he might be in the top 10 of our seniority list, which is very impressive. But anyway, Jim, told to help me introduce Steve today. Steve is frequently challenged when using an unfamiliar food processor. He can get visibly very frustrated. He can't talk and chew gum syndrome. You have to see him up here. A staffer or Mary will usually come to the rescue. Speaking of staff, Steve cannot have enough helpers, often lining up as many as 8 or 9. It kind of resembles a Keystone Cops performance with helpers practically running into each other during demonstrations.
Early on in the Lazarus LaBelle Palm cooking school days, the temptation of print publicity led to a demonstration of a New Orleans mile-high pie, literally melting away while a professional camera crew adjusted the studio lighting to take the photograph. It's probably unfair to pin that on Steve, but it's difficult to suppress.
I was talking the whole time.
Yeah, you were talking the whole time. So, fellow Rotarians, let's
welcome Steve
Stover.
Make it back here. They're trying to get out of that thing here. Well, thank you guys. That was hysterical. And I'm really glad to be back. They've already said, given my free advertising for 89.7 WSU NPR radio with our new host, Anna Staver, not to be confused with Stover. And we do have a cooking class coming up in March at Franklin Park Conservatory with my buddy Rich Terapak. And we're going to celebrate 42 years of cooking together without killing each other. So I hope some of you will be able to join us. I'm so glad to be back. I think this is my 7th time at Columbus Rotary, and I'm always glad to be back. Well, recently, my wife, the saintly and long-suffering Mary Stover, known also to me as the Supreme Commander, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and the head office, suggested a spontaneous date night. So we tootled off and we picked Veritas, which is a consistent #1 restaurant in Columbus. And we went to the bar upstairs called the Citizens Trust, probably the most beautiful bar in the Midwest, and a great romantic place to go. And we had a couple of bites and a glass of wine. And she looked at me and she said, first of all, I feel grown up. And secondly, I feel like I'm on vacation. It's so different you know, we have our busy lives and we don't think about visiting our places. So here we go today. We felt like we were tourists on our own, in our own city. And so I'm going to take you on a little guided tour of what's new and notable on the Columbus restaurant scene. And I hope you will consider taking your trip yourself to try some of Columbus's wonderful restaurants. And as Jim Boudreaux admonishes us, please try to get out of your culinary and geographical comfort zone. As you'll find out, there's a lot of cool stuff out there. Well, the pandemic is behind us, but a lot of the things that happened during the pandemic are still with us. Shorter hours of restaurants, a lot are only open Wednesday through Sunday. 6 p.m. 6 p.m. is the new 8 p.m. for dining out, and people are making reservations. Shorter menus too, because of food costs and the cost of keeping all that food, and continued emphasis on delivery, drive-through, takeout, and curbside. Although I've still not gone to DoorDash and Uber. But there are a lot of other themes that I think the pandemic affected that are still with it and are even still emerging. Outdoor dining, huge. More than 300 restaurants in Columbus have patios or outdoor tables or terraces or decks. Rooftop bars are all the rage today. We've gone from 0 to more than 4 dozen. We went to the one at the Junto Hotel, which has spectacular views of downtown Columbus and my old office at the Supreme Court building. And Dora's designated outdoor recreation areas are popping up everywhere, where you can walk through Dublin or Hilliard or Columbus Arena District and carry a drink. Although it looks like they're going to expand it to the whole downtown, so I don't know what's going on there. Food halls. The original food hall was in North Market, but we now have the Bud Dairy. There's one at Hilliard. There's one at Bridge Park. And just today, it was announced that the Grandview Crossing at Riverside and Grandview Avenue is going to have a food hall. That I found that out this morning. World cuisine. 40 years ago, the Grumpy Gourmet described Columbus restaurants as the only ethnic restaurants in Columbus as Guim Long, Yang Mei, and Prizzuti. But now it's just unbelievable. The Columbus Monthly Restaurant Guide, the last one that was out, listed restaurants from 48 different countries just in Columbus. And on one drive from on Bethel Road, from Olentangy River Road, the Sawmill, I found 42 ethnic restaurants and groceries. So who knew? So we've just, the world has exploded. Happy hours. You gotta love it. You go in, you have a little drink, you have a little bite to eat, and you're home in time for Jeopardy. What could be better? But happy hour does give you a chance to try new restaurants that you might not otherwise go to. And frankly, appetizers and small plates are some of the most interesting things on the menu, on the left side of the menu. Vegetarian. My buddy Denny Ramey described vegetarian cuisine as sawdust and grass clipping. But now there are more than a dozen vegetarian places, including the #1 restaurant in Columbus, Commune, is vegetarian. It's near a Nationwide Hospital. I was proud to take my Romeo group, retired old men eating out, although the wives call it really old men eating out, to Commune, and 16 carnivores, 70-something carnivores, and they loved it, and everybody took their spouse, so the people at Commune were pretty happy. Well, so where are we in 23? Well, in 23, the Columbus restaurant scene is literally on fire. 3 of the newest and hottest restaurants in Columbus have 8 to 18-foot walls of fire. This drives Boudreaux crazy. He's a pyromaniac. And have you ever tried to get a reservation today? A number of the most popular restaurants, you've got to reserve on the first day of the month before the month when you want to go. So if you want a reservation at certain places in January, you got to reserve on December 1st. In March, Forbes had an interesting feature article entitled, "Why Should You Plan a Spring Trip to Columbus, Ohio? A Hidden Gem in Plain Sight," featuring some of the restaurants I'm going to talk about today. And not to mention numerous articles in the New York Times picking Columbus as one of the 52 places in the world to visit, Food and Wine. And just today, it was announced that Essence magazine picked Columbus as one of the best places in the world, best destinations for culinary travel in the world. And the quote was, let's see if I can find it. I just printed this morning. It's called home by chefs and restaurants that have been given kudos from the New York Times, Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, and others. Chef B.J. Lieberman, who opened Harayeth, which I'll talk about this year, with dishes like whole jerk, guinea hen, and yucca hash browns, grilled turnips and pineapple. I'm not going there. Earned a James Beard semifinalist award in 2023. So who knew that I think America has discovered Columbus. I think we're right up there with cities like Austin and Nashville in terms of and it's sort of a second golden era. We had Hankey, Rigsby, and Rosendale in the 90s, and now we have Avishar Barua, B.J. Lieberman, and Josh Dalton, who we'll talk about. So the top new restaurants of 2023, you have your own Stovarian checklist there if you want to take notes. And I'm going to talk about at least what I think are maybe 10 of the top new restaurants. Number one, and this is in chronological order, and it was really a little before 23, but Fire, F-Y-R, in the downtown Hilton. It's a wood-fired signature restaurant. Again, you won't believe you're in Columbus with the 3-story ceilings and the wall of fire, and some really interesting chef from Sebastian LaRocca, who's Argentinian, who's been all over the world cooking, and who is bringing some cool stuff to Columbus, including a fire roasted empanada and a roasted skirt steak and some other things. Agni from Avishar Barua, who was on Top Chef a couple of years ago. He also has a little breakfast place that I love in Worthington called Joya, which is named after his mother. But my favorite dish there when we went the first week they were open, I would call this uber creative, edgy, Asian influenced, wood-fired tasting. Although you can go in and sit at the very tiny bar and try individual dishes. My favorite dish was SpaghettiOs. Little rings of fresh pasta, those soft, and I get excited about this, and crispy. A meatball made of kefta, which is a lamb sausage. And the sauce was the butter sauce, tomato butter sauce that you'd find in India. So it's really creative. It's a five-course tasting menu, but you'll get a dozen at least little dishes. And I recommend that too. Speck, which is from Josh Dalton, who owns Veritas, which has been a consistent #1 place, and I think is overall one of the best restaurants in Columbus. He opened a new Italian called Speck. We were there the night they opened. I was stalking them, and we had a really nice little dinner. Speck is a like smoked prosciutto, and it had a little beautiful presentation of speck, and then a whole ball of burrata and some pickled vegetables. So it was really, really good, and it's sort of straightforward Italian otherwise. Cento is Cameron Mitchell's 100th restaurant. It's in German Village in the old G. Michael's location, and it is a very high-end, upscale Italian. Maybe some veal dishes in the 60s and some lasagna in the 40s, but it's a beautiful place and may have, when it's open in spring, one of the spectacular patios in town. Valentina's, which is also a Cameron Mitchell restaurant at Bridge Park, if you're following along, is it's sort of a modern, it's his fifth different Italian restaurant in Columbus. And they're all different and they all have interesting things. A sort of a fun thing is Stories on High, which is the 28th floor rooftop bar in the Hilton, also the same chef. And when we went there, we thought the food was really good. This is a good time of year to go. We went for happy hour at 4 o'clock and we're able to stay and watch the sun go down and watch, it's mostly west viewing, but there are views on at least 3 directions. And it's got a very lively bar and it's one of those places to be that don't fit my demographic. And one that surely does is Jackie O's on 4th, a long time anticipated tap room from the Athens brewery, Jackie O's. The cool thing is that they have an 8,000 square foot patio on several levels. And I see some people have been there and it seats 300. It's got fire pits and it's got some interesting food. They haven't set it up, but it's one is called Good Friends. The guy from Wario's Steaks as making some really cute little dishes that I think are pretty fun. And then there's the uber trendy Junto Hotel, which is on the west side of the river, which I mentioned has a rooftop bar with spectacular views of downtown and a wood-fired restaurant. Is there an echo in this place?
Yeah. Fine.
Wood-fired?
No, fine.
Everywhere. No, I'm talking about wood-fired. I mentioned 35. And there's a little West Tavern with wood-fired food. And I don't know what to say about this, but they also have a walk-up poutine bar. Do you know what poutine is? It's a classic dish from Canada, which is basically, correct me if I'm wrong, French fries with gravy on them. What could go wrong?
And turtle cheese.
Oh.
Curd.
All right, oh, cheese curds, absolutely. I love cheese curds. And then finally, in my new list is this is just a funny little place in Lindbergh called Suburban, Suburbon, Southern Kitchen. And it's a Southern cuisine and bourbon restaurant from the guys that started at Barcelona, then opened Alqueria on King Avenue. And now one of the guys has moved up there, Patrick Barker's moved up there. So those are my top 10, but since I wrote this, there are another half dozen restaurants of note that have opened in Columbus. Can you imagine how grueling it is to try to keep up with all this? Jim, one of our buddies, coined the term "eat through the pain." So that's our motto, eat through the pain. So here's some brand new restaurants, and I haven't even been to some of these. So first is Rosebuds. It's in Delaware. It's the newest, how am I doing for time? It's the newest restaurant from Josh Dalton, who owns Veritas. He owns Accent Bar, he owns Spec. And it's in the original Veritas location in downtown Delaware. It's sort of incubator space. He recently had a seafood restaurant that I like called Cove, but Junto is self-described as a dive bar where dive bar meets gourmet. From feta dip to caviar, lobster roll to Creole andouille hot dogs. But Josh told me he thinks it's more like what cooks make at home. You go home after a rough night and whip up something cool, and it could be anything from andouille sausage to caviar. Cobra is another. Now these places are all a little bit edgier. Cobra's opened in October in the brewery district from some Watershed distillery alums. It's an Asian American neighborhood bar in the historic brewery district. They have a Shanghai noon burger and a lot of sort of American bar food that has Asian influence. It might be a fun place to go late at night. I've heard a lot of the people I know in the business go there after they close. And one place that my buddy Rich Terapak, my colleague with whom I've taught cooking for 42 years and spent a lot of time doing restaurant reviews. Went to Adelaide's Gin Joint on campus. It's self-described as a modern prohibition-inspired eatery, drinkery, and jazz experience. And it has a real small scratch menu, but he said it was really good. Just small things, great burger and great little pieces of things. And then finally, the Spaghetti Warehouse is open again. Nothing, if you have a craving for red sauce Italian, it's your place to go. But I'd like to see what it looks like after all these years. Notable closings. We celebrate the passing of 94th Aero Squadron. In my hood, Filio Riverside, but Filio and Vino Vino are still open. Tazi, which was behind Rigsby's, that his ex-wife. Smith and Walensky, which is planning a move to downtown, and McCormick and Schmick's, which will be this is at Easton, which will be replaced by a Mastro's Steakhouse. Are you familiar? Anybody that spent time in Phoenix or Scottsdale, it's a very popular steakhouse there. Steakhouses have been really up and down. 3 or 4 of them. Gala Park closed, and Urban Steakhouse closed, and some of them are reopened. So steakhouses, well, Woodruff and I like to cook them at home, right? So here's what's coming up. This is my coming attractions. On Friday, Jim and I and our wives and Rich and Roberta all went to the grand opening of Littleton's Market. It's in the old Tarpees and other, it's been many incarnations in Tremont Shopping Center in Upper Arlington. But it is unlike anything I think we've seen in Columbus. One of my friends said nothing like this I've seen other than in Cambridge, Massachusetts, a place called Formaggio Kitchen, which has cheeses and meats, and it's everything on the outside of the store. They have a cafe. They have the most spectacular meat case you'll ever see, including locally sourced veal and lamb, which is hard to find, and great seafood counter, a mushroom area, and a lot of prepared foods and other things. In fact, we're going to go today and go back again. The chef was at John George and Danielle in New York City. The sommelier is Chris Dillman, who was at the Refectory and several other places. And of course, the legendary James Williams, the butcher, who's been there 34 years and is wonderful. Other news coming up, Columbus Business First reports that Capitol Grill, a national high-end steakhouse, is going to be in Columbus at an interesting place at the old Champs location on Olentangy River Road at Kinnear. Go figure. Cameron Mitchell has 2 new concepts, and I didn't get a chance to call them this week. The first one is a steakhouse called Butcher and Rose in the new PNC building at the corner of Broad and 4th, across the street from the Columbus Club. And it's in a lower level patio, like you'll see in New York or Boston, where there's a lower level, and it's going to be a steakhouse concept. Also, a new concept in the former Bon V location in Easton, described by Business First as Del Mar Easton. We'll see. I think that one's still evolving from what I've heard from Steve Weiss, their development director. A couple other new places. Isla, a new Andrew Smith place. He was a chef at Rockmill Brewery and opening chef at a couple other places. He's had pop-up dinners for a couple of years, and now he's opening a new place in Marion Village, which is south of German Village, for those who aren't familiar with that. Mastro's Steakhouse, I mentioned. Grand Rue, a French bistro, and I would say we really need a French. We don't have any real French bistros. It's going to be at Gay and High. And then the crazy Guy Fieri is going to open a Columbus place in 2024. So you want to stop for questions? You want me to keep going? And then okay. A couple emerging trends. Artisan butcher shops. We haven't seen artisan butcher shops in Columbus for a long time. We now have the Butcher and Grocer in Grandview. We have Hungarian Butcher in Linwood. Macellaria in Bexley. Wine and Vine up in Polaris area, and Colo at the North Market. It's wonderful to have somebody like James Williams or a butcher that you can trust to do things just the way you want. Wine bars, I think they're a coming trend in Columbus, as they are all over the world. The bottle shop on King Avenue has got a real new vibe. Laundry bar, there's a wine bar in the Hausfrau Haven in German Village. It's only open Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, but you can go in and buy a bottle and pay a small corkage, and they have little foods and always entertaining. And then Twisted Vine on Fifth Avenue is doubling its size, and they're gonna have a real wine bar. Another trend, comfort food, elevated Midwestern cuisine like lobster mac and cheese and is sort of popping up. It's real new, but you can see it a lot at gastro pubs and such. Another trend, fixed price tasting dinners. Veritas has them. Harea, did I mention Harea in my top new? I must have skipped it. Harea is the new, boy, thanks for catching that. It's a new restaurant from BJ Lieberman, who has Chapman's Eat Market, which was noted in 2021 in the New York Times as it's one of the top 50 new restaurants in America. Then he and his wife opened the Jazz Lounge, Ginger Rabbit, at the corner of Buttles and High. And now he's opened Horace, which is in the short north. It's a very cool place. It's got a very light and airy Mediterranean feel upstairs and a small bar and dining area. And you go downstairs in the lower level where there's a wall of fire, and big bars that may seat 20 people that you can sit and dine and watch it. And they're also, for the rest of the year, doing a 6-course tasting menu at a fairly good price. I think it's like $100. And so that's exciting. And Chapman's Eat Market does occasional these tasting dinners. Agni is all tasting menu. And so that's and then the final one is pop-up dinners. Fire, the restaurant in the Hilton, the downtown Hilton, has brought in 7 world-class chefs. Curtis Duffy, James Beard Award winner, chefs from Panama and South America. And now he's going to do 7 new ones next year. But tomorrow night, they're having a 10 hands dinner. 5 of Columbus's top chefs. Avishar Barua, BJ Lieberman, you've heard their names before. Chef Sebastian LaRocca, the chef from Lindy's, and Ray Ray, the barbecue guy who you'd never expect to be in a gourmet. So 10 hands, 5 chefs are each cooking a dish. There's a wait list, but if you're interested, give it a call. We're gonna go, and because I miss Curtis Duffy. So I think we'll stop here. Oh, the other thing that's interesting is I think this is an interesting concept, is that some restaurants are having a 3% fee that pays for, and it's controversial, that pays for health insurance and other things for the staff. And it's been controversial, but that is something that people are talking about. So with that in mind, what are your questions? Yeah.
What do you think about the 90-minute?
I don't like that. 2 hours, maybe. But I can barely get through the menu in the night. If you have to, I do understand that some places people need to take advantage, not just fine dining, but places like the wonderful Pistacia Vera, where people would go and sit all day, or Panera and buy a cup of coffee and stay all day. But I do think some people don't respect the restaurant's time and how tough it is to be in the business now too. So it's sort of a mixed bag. But if you're going to do it, I think we had one recently where they said 2 hours. Up here?
I'm just curious because when you're talking about places that had great views, the restaurant that used to be at the top of Nationwide, is that ever gonna reopen as a restaurant?
Oh, there have been so many, we're talking about the Christopher Inn today,
So,
rotating restaurant, oh gosh, there have been a bunch of the top of the nation. There's one on top of the state office tower. It's a restaurant space, but I don't know. Yes, I think I think the 28th floor at the Hilton, is a good example of a restaurant, but it's a grouped up bar. Yes, sir, Hadley?
Two questions, quick review on Carbonium market. You've been there,
Yes.
what do you think of the arrangement and the food?
Well, just like, well, if you like Carfagna's, you'll love the new Littleton. It's Disneyland for foodies.
So it's very comparable.
I would say the Littleton's is a little more high end, but they've got little stations, a fresh pasta station, a charcuterie station. They make some of their own cheese. It's fabulous. And then they've got a restaurant to boot. So it's very similar concepts. I would say Littleton's is a little bigger, maybe quite a bit bigger. But then if you add the restaurant, it's that. Your second question.
You mentioned Guy Fieri earlier. I read that he's having a food festival.
Yes,
Who do you know about that a little bit?
I don't know much. It's gonna be here. That's right. I think it's gonna be here. Yeah,
Where in Columbus?
I have no idea.
Yeah, okay, okay.
CAS is what I've heard. Thank you. All right, the guy with the great ensemble back there.
Please come back and speak soon.
Oh, okay, thank you. Well, as you can see, I have an avocational hazard. I do love the food. But I think 18 months is a year or 18 months, there's enough change to make it worth it, but I'm always happy to come back. I love to do it. I do the Dublin AM Rotary, I do the Circleville Rotary and the Newark Rotary and.
Here we go.
Oh,
Okay, I don't wanna just be a Debbie Downer, but I want your opinion on the value of Centos for the price. I've been there. Any opinions, any thoughts? Am I missing something? Did I not get all the experience?
being
that I-
tactful, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think, but the cost has really increased at everywhere. If you think about restaurants, 10 years ago, we were looking at, or 20 years ago, my wife and I were reviewing where we go for our anniversary dinners every year. And it's staggering, but the cost of food, the cost of staffing has really been a huge problem. Some places are paying $25 an hour, some are even providing to keep people employed. So I just want to support the Columbus restaurants. I think it's really important to support them. And so that we have an atmosphere where we are among the top 10 or 12 cities in the United States as far as our culinary scene. Right here.
I don't think I've ever heard you mention Hyde Park Steakhouse.
I love Hyde Park Steak.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, they're sort of a Cleveland locally owned place. I don't usually go to steakhouses. I've never been to Jeff Ruby's. We have a story there. When I was doing Zagat, we accidentally left out one of our restaurants. And so it was the first Zagat surveys were paper surveys that Jim and some other guys, we circulated 20,000 paper surveys around Ohio. We got amazing 2,600 responses. And the first time we ever did it. And he was so bad, he photocopied the surveys and sent them in with his one restaurant open. So we have a history. Yeah.
You have an interesting comment on your write-up here about the refectory, calling it one of the last fine dining restaurants in Columbus.
Yeah.
Can you name 2 or 3 others for us?
I'm not sure I can. I'll think about it. First of all, it is fine dining, white tablecloth, serious cuisine, and again, it's a good reason to support it. I wish they had the bistro menu in the lounge like they used to. But, other than private clubs, I'm having trouble thinking of any, really serious fine dining restaurants. Lindy, Gary, good call, good call. The top. Thank you.
Yeah.
Propping me up. People.
Steve, what do you think is missing from what we need more of?
Good question. I would say number one, a French bistro. We have very, very little French food. If you go to, people say, well, French food doesn't sell, but if you go to Boston or New York, there are plenty of wonderful French restaurants, and I think it's one of the great cuisines in the world. And I think that French bistro at Gay and High will be something I think would be really good. But you could also get, I had a great hanger steak at Pareja, a wood-fired hanger steak. That was terrific. Yep,
Can you tell Lindy's they need to change the red back?
I agree.
Someone like you, they would.
And bread baskets, that's a tough thing too. Another change in the world. You don't see bread baskets. Sometimes you see them pass bread, but in many places they don't have it, or more likely, you have to pay for it. Some places 8 and 9, I think, La Tavola, one of my favorite places. And if we have time, I can talk about some places you can go to, and I don't know how the time is, but on your sheet, there are some places I suggest to go. But yes, I love bread baskets, obviously.
Well, Lindy's changed their bread and it's back.
Yeah. Well, it's a tough one.
Yes, my husband and I have gone to Degree at Columbus State, their culinary school.
Agreed,
restaurants.
yes.
And, really good, their classes, the community classes that they hold there.
Huh?
I'm curious, do you think that, a place like this, a hall could be, I don't know, could spark maybe more innovation in restauranting or? could-
Oh, I think that's one of the best things that's happened to the Columbus restaurant scene ever. Having an institution like that provides trained people, not only for the kitchen, but also for the front of the house. And a lot of these apprentices, they'll work in Degrees in the kitchen for a month and then they'll be servers. I was just there with Josh Wickham, who's the culinary director there, who actually was a chef here years ago. And also one of the other former chefs, Joel, was there too, was working there. And I was taking Patrick Allen, my wine buddy, because he's hoping to start a wine program. But it is an incredible institution. It's also a great place to eat. The food's really good. It's just that they have sort of funny hours. They don't, because the students work in the place. They're not open during college breaks, and they're not always open every day but it's really cute. And it's called Degrees, and it's a Mitchell Hall in Columbus State. Yes. In the back. Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of the restaurants have catering as well. What would be, some do better jobs than others? What are some of your top caterers, holidays now, but in general? Or do you get into that, or rate it at all?
No, I don't, but the catering business has really changed. A lot of the great old caterings, like, well, 2 caterers is still around under another name. Our friend Angela Petra does a great job. So there's one. But a lot of the old timey ones, there was one in Dublin that
Made from
was
scratch.
made from scratch. Larry was there, and but you don't see as many caterers around. A lot of restaurants do some catering. Cameron Mitchell has a very big business on catering, but people also go now to grocery stores like Fresh Whole Foods and other places like that, and sort of self-cater. And so there's less of it, and also staffing is a huge problem. It's really hard if you're just catering an event at your home to find helpers for that. So the world has changed in that respect. Good question. Yes, sir.
Sort of a fan of simple food. So don't forget about kudos to this place because they turn ordinary things into something extraordinary.
Thank you. Well, those ladies are fabulous. Norma and Betty, they've been around for a few years. The new chef at Rocky Ford is Bill Glover, who used to have his own restaurant called Sage on High Street between Doddridge and Neal. And was also the executive chef at the Downtown Hilton before it was added to. He's also done stuff like work with Ray and doing pop-up dinners and supper clubs out in Granville. But we are so lucky to have him here as at a private club of a chef of that caliber. And I think the Columbus Club also has a wonderful chef, Josh, who used to be at South Village Grill. Both excellent restaurants. Thank you all.